Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Finding Brave. How are you? How's it going? I think this is coming to you. Oh, I can't even say, but not when we're doing it. But I hope things are really going well for you. I pray for that. And I'm so excited to have the wonderful Ed Evarts. Did I get it right, Ed?
You did.
With me today. We were yakking up a storm before we recorded. There's a lot we love to talk about, Ed, right?
There is, most of which we cannot talk about today,
That's
but
right. You will not be hearing it, my friends, but you will be hearing other things that are so amazing from Ed's mouth. And we are talking about how to stop micromanaging and move from doer to leader. I wish I had listened to this 25 years ago. So we're going to lay it on you about what we've seen in terms of the leaders we've worked with, and as an expert in that and your own leadership work. Often we teach what we often need to know, or sometimes we're only one step ahead of what we're teaching or behind. Or what am I saying? What I mean is, I think both of us probably have lived a lot of what we're about to talk about, that those moments where we knew we were not the best leader we could be. So we're going to really be honest with you and help you be the bravest leader you can. So let me give you a little bit about Ed so you understand. Ed is the founder and president of Excellius Leadership Development. Love that. Love that name. He's a leadership coach, a team coach, and a business strategist. I really would love to talk about team coaching too. He's the author of the brand new book, Drive Your Career: 9 High Impact Ways to Take Responsibility for Your Own Success. And Ed is a fellow podcaster. I've been on your wonderful podcast, Be Brave at Work. Can't thank you enough for taking the time, Ed, to join. All right, let's
thanks,
hop
Kathy.
in. Let's hop in. Let's talk about what is it that you see in working with so many leaders and managers. What are they doing in terms of mucking it up, micromanaging, making their teams and staff crazy? What are the mistakes they're making, Ed?
Well, I think the challenges that many leaders face are surprisingly consistent from role to role or organization to organization. I mean, in their mind, their situation is very unique to them. But for people like you and I who meet hundreds of people during a year, we start to see patterns and trends that surface.
Right.
And micromanagement certainly is a classic behavioral challenge that most leaders have. We'll talk a little bit about that.
Yeah.
Delegation, or the lack of delegating, which is part of, I think, micromanagement, is another behavior that people have challenge with. Communication skills is another key area where people don't feel they communicate effectively or not in the right ways.
Mm.
Don't do it enough, or just don't do it well when they do it. So, those are three behaviors that I think if I talk to any individual who is looking for a coach, I would bet you that one of the three areas they would mention is that they either get feedback they're micromanaging, they're
Mm.
getting feedback that they're not delegating, or
Mm.
they're getting feedback that they're not a great communicator.
And you also, I want to talk about this a little later, empathy. Um, it probably doesn't come out from their mouths that I'm not empathic or empathetic, but it probably comes out in other ways. My staff seems to think I don't understand them or I don't relate well to them, but I do want to touch on empathy. It's such a vitally important aspect of interpersonal connection, right?
It is. It is. And I would tell you that as I look at individuals that I work with professionally, empathy is the most significant skill that's absent in most corporate leaders, and not completely absent. It's not like it's a 0 or 100 game, right? You either don't do it
Yeah,
at
it's
all
a
or do it all
spectrum.
the time. It's a spectrum, but they're lower on the spectrum than they should be. And I think it's the number one area of interest for most leaders,
Really?
and that most leaders are not doing enough to help build strong relationships with teams, colleagues, peers, subordinates, whatever. It's not done enough in the workplace.
Oh, so let's start there. Being a former therapist, it's one of my favorite things. I even did some training with parents about if you want to build self reliant and self confident children, empathy is critical. And they're like, what are you talking about? So can we start there? and then work backwards.
Sure.
How do you, when you're assessing a leader, how do you know empathy is the problem? How do you see it? How does it emerge?
Well, most leaders have an idea of what they want to work on to be more effective, and they've collected that information either through 360 or from performance reviews. At some point it's bubbled up where, I need some additional assistance in order to make progress. One of the areas of assistance is coaching. There's also training and, other things you can do. Coaching isn't the only answer, but, it is a key answer that people look at. And so, typically when we interview folks for consideration to be their coach, they will share that they have gotten feedback that they're not empathetic enough or could be more empathetic in order to be a better leader. Certainly as I work with people, to be honest, I haven't seen it too much where I said to somebody, gee, you shared with me 4 things you wanted to work on. A key another area is empathy because you are very low in that arena. Because most of the time we're working one-on-one. And so I don't get the opportunity to see them with others. And so I don't see it enough to say, gee, I just saw you had a conversation with Bob who works in your office, and that would have been a great opportunity to be empathetic, and you didn't demonstrate it, right? So,
So
it's
can
usually,
you, I know exactly what that means to me. Can you, for someone listening who thinks, that might be me, people have
mhm.
told me that. Can you tell me 3 strategies or ways you intervene to help someone develop empathy?
So, it starts with really them being aware of the fact that they need to demonstrate more empathy in the workplace. And for me, empathy, and there's a lot of different ways you could define it. And I'm certainly
Right.
not a scientist. I haven't studied empathy technically, but
Yeah.
I believe it's meeting somebody where they are
Right.
and not where you are. Because people who meet where you are don't connect with people well. When you meet with where they are, depending on where that might be, your likelihood of connecting with them is important. So, I think there's several things people can do. One of them, and this is the hardest, is the first step, which is to build your awareness of other people, your social awareness of how people are, how they behave, and do you see deviations in respect to how they're behaving that might provide you an opportunity to be empathetic. So if you're an upbeat, talkative, positive person,
Mm,
Kathy, and
mm.
you come into the office one day and you say, hey, Ed, and you go to your cubicle, that might be a signal to me that you're not having a good day. That good day could influence the workplace. And that's why this is so important, because emotional intelligence, of which empathy is a behavior associated with emotional intelligence, can influence the business in positive or negative ways. So that's an opportunity for me to connect with you to see what might be going on and seeing if there's a way that I can help you.
I love that. So, when I think about empathy, a lot of it is how I speak to you. So, I want to give a tip, but I want to go back to something you said that was so interesting. So, I think, briefly, one of the hardest things in my entire life was becoming a therapist where I had to sit with a pedophile, an abuser, bad stuff. And I remember my
Mhm.
first, month of doing it. I'm sitting with a guy who hauled off and, smacked his daughter. And he came from a place where I said, tell me about that. And he said, look, she's being disrespectful and I have to teach her. And my words weren't getting through. So to me, it makes sense. And I just want to share what empathy looks like in that situation. And I really feel this is true, whether you're a leader, a manager, a teammate, if I come in and blow over you about what I think about what you are doing and it isn't good, let's call him Dan. Dan, let me give you some teaching here. You hitting her is blah, blah, blah. It's not going to, he doesn't want to hear that. And if
Mhm.
I come across not meeting him where he is, and that doesn't mean accepting it and loving it, it means meeting him where he is, that he believes it's the right thing to do that. If I don't do that, I've lost him.
Mhm.
So, what the heck am I doing as a therapist if I'm judging him and separating ourselves? So, I had to learn, and it was so hard. I got to find some way to love this person. I got to find some place to connect. And I got very good at it because you can kind of see when you don't, you lose the person.
You
Um,
know, I,
yeah,
I,
tell me what you think from that story.
well, what I'm thinking of is, most of the empathy opportunities people will have in the workplace vary. I'm thinking about habit number 5 from Stephen Covey's seminal book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective
Love it.
People. And habit number 5 is seek first to understand,
It's a big
then to be understood. And unfortunately, we live in a world where first we want to make people understand us. And then if I have time, I'll work to understand you.
right.
And I think if it was opposite and we all worked a little bit harder to understand others, why do you feel that way? Where is that behavior coming from? Who else did you know that demonstrated that behavior? If it was you, how did it make you feel? Did you like it when your father, hit you? Those types of things.
Right.
Your likelihood of being at their level of where they are and then building from there, to your point, is greater than just coming in at a much higher level and saying, "Oh, you can't do that. That's really inappropriate. And I don't ever want to see that again."
Right.
So,
Exactly right.
seeking first to understand, and again, it's just Kathy, it's just this awareness of how people behave and building a skill set around how can I be more observant of them so I can detect when there's a deviation that I could step in and demonstrate empathy, I think is a huge win for
That's a
most
great
corporate leaders.
that's a great strategy. So what I wanted to loop back on in that situation where the person walked in and wasn't their upbeat self and you're suggesting that the leader note that and understand there's a shift and show that you care. Do you think that that's how a lot of people understand that they're not empathetic or empathic, that people feel he doesn't care about me? Is that what's coming out mostly?
I think so. I think that's one of the ways that it does come out, that through some feedback mechanism, or if people came in to talk to others about me, to give me feedback, I might hear in that conversation circle that he doesn't connect well with people. I don't know if he cares for me or not. I've had people say, I don't even know if my boss is married or has children. There's such a
Right.
gap between me and that person. I don't know anything about them. He comes in or she comes in, the work is the work, it gets done, and then we go home. And there's no personal interaction. And when I say personal, I don't mean, going out for margaritas and
Right.
going swimming in each other's swimming pools, et cetera, but, some greater awareness, because people are holistic entities that bring with them everything. If I have a disagreement with my wife today and then go to work, it's not like once I walk in the door at work, I've forgotten it. I still may be irritated. I still may be angry. I'm still thinking about when I get home tonight, I'm really going to bring that topic back up again. It really influences me in the workplace. And it would be great if there was somebody to say, "Gee, Ed, you don't seem to be yourself today. Is everything okay?" I might say, "Nope, everything's fine. I don't want to talk about it." Or I might say, "Gee, it's funny you should ask. I'm having a tough day and it would be great to talk with somebody about it." You don't
Well,
know unless you ask,
love
but
it.
that's what you want to practice, is being more available to others, even if they don't take you up on it.
I so love this. And what comes to mind is in my last 2 years in corporate life, I literally felt that no one knew who I was. No one cared.
How is that possible, Kathy? I mean,
I think I know what you mean, but I don't even want to know. You mean I talk so much? How does someone not know?
no, no, but you're a very outgoing, positive person. I can't
Thank
imagine
you.
that you wouldn't be well known in your organization.
Well, let me be clear. Thank you for that compliment. I'm taking it in. They saw me as that. What I mean is just what you're saying. Who you are at work is not
Right.
everything. I was a mom. I was a singer. I was a tennis player. I had a musical life. Nobody cared. Get the work done, sign the contract, bring in the $1,000,000. So I can't emphasize this enough, people. If you feel like you're an island and nobody cares and no one asks you one question that isn't about work, you're not going to be happy, I
Well, there's
think.
a chapter in the book you mentioned, Drive Your Career, called Play the Hand You've Been Dealt. And that surrounds largely this reality that you have to play the hand you've been dealt. And if you have been dealt a workplace where people don't care about you as a person, they can care about you as an asset, like come in, do the work, go
Yeah.
home. I don't care anything else about you. You have a choice to make. And just like a poker hand, you can't dictate the hand you get dealt. It's the hand you've been dealt. And it's either going to be a great hand where people love you and you have great relationships and they will go listen to you sing, and you have a wonderful life with them, or it's a bad hand, right, where people don't care. And so you have a choice, and that choice is either to fold, which is move on and find an opportunity that better connects with you as a person. You can bluff. I'm not a big fan of bluffing. I think you can bluff for a couple of days, but not for an extended period of time. But
Meaning to be who you're
yeah,
not.
yeah, pretend
Pretend.
everything's great, right? And that's ironically, that's where most of my clients are. They have tough relationships or tough workplaces, and they're just bluffing, making it seem like it's better than it is, or getting by, or it's a paycheck, and they're not doing anything. The third choice, of course, is taking action, right? Turning in some cards with the hope that you get better cards, but you have to do something. So, in that scenario where you're describing, especially if it's a place that's low empathy, and I've worked at with people who work in organizations that empathy is not a word that's even used.
Yeah, it's
They
like,
have a choice
oh,
to make.
it's soft.
It's
It's
soft.
such a
Yep. It's
dumb skill, people think. It's
yeah.
not
It's a
affecting
dumb.
my
It's
bottom line.
ineffective. Right. Right. You have a choice to make, which is this a place I want to be? Is this a place I want to change, or do I want to get out and find a place that better suits my skill set?
I love it. I'm gonna leave you with on that note with something I learned in therapy. If you're unhappy about something, you have two choices. You have three with your I love that analogy with the cards. But it's either you change your feelings about the situation or you change the situation.
Right.
Otherwise, nothing's gonna change.
Right.
Oh, I love it. Now let's move to the managing thing. I call it in many cases perfectionistic over functioning, which I see in women doing more than is healthy, appropriate, necessary, and trying to get an A plus in all of it. And
Yep.
it's crippling for you and it's crippling for everyone you're micromanaging and over functioning around. But can I hear your language about it? Why do people do it? And how do you help them stop doing it?
Well, I think first we need to understand why people do it. And again, this I'm not a scientist, so I've not studied this topic specifically, but
Yeah,
with the
but
clients
you've
I've
seen
worked
it
with,
hundreds
I've
of
seen it,
times.
and it's a very, very common behavior. And the pattern I see most often is people who have grown up within an organization. So
Yeah.
they came in as a independent contributor, and then they became a supervisor, and then they became a manager, and then they became a vice president. And what we have a tendency to do is we bring everything with us that got us there. And
Wow.
that includes all of the details, all of the knowledge, all the information, because hey, I got promoted. No one can do it better than me. I must be
Yikes.
great at this. And I want to make sure everybody knows. And rather than realize that the organization needs you now to shift your focus from doing the details to being more strategic and future focused and planful, understanding the risks that might be happening and things of that nature, I stay stuck in the details because that's what got me this job. And so we get stuck there. And the reason that exists because of that type of behavior is because organizations just are not structured to notice it and do anything about it. So if
Oh,
all that work is getting done, that's all they care about, not who's doing it, unless
right.
I observe it as a leader and say, gee, why did I see you at that meeting today? Or why does this report have your name on it? You have employees. You have them for a reason.
Right.
I say that a lot to leaders who micromanage, which is, you have employees for a reason. They should be good at doing this. If you're still doing this, that's a problem because it means you don't trust your
Right.
employees, and that means there's a functional issue in your relationship with them, which doesn't mean that they're living up to their potential, and they could be exit, prone to exit because you're not giving them the ability to get the job done.
How fantastic a way to put it. Can I ask you this? I think that what I see is a number of people have actually said these words. I was great at that job as director, and I'm supposed to be strategic,
Hmm.
and I don't know how to be. In fact, I have a dear friend, Dory Clark, who is just
Hmm.
so amazing. She's been on the show. I believe that she did a LinkedIn learning course on strategic thinking, and it's one of the most, viewed, taken courses. I would love to take it, how and these are short modules, but how you teach strategic thinking. But do you see that it's not only the fact that they're bringing everything with them to that higher level position, but they may truly not know how to do the higher level strategic work. They just don't know how, or maybe they're not even good at it. Do you see that in your work you do?
So I do think we live in a world today where people move from role to role
Yeah.
and ascend through role to role quicker than ever before. I love the old IBM model where I started in the mailroom and I retired 45 years later as the senior vice president of sales. But
Eesh.
that took 45 years. Now
Right.
people want every 2 years to 3 years to 4 years to move to the next role. And what happens there by default is you're just not as prepared for that new role because you've got there so quickly. And so, hey, what a boon for coaching, right? That people need help fitting into their new role and being more expansive and knowledgeable and impactful to the organization. But the reason that happened is because the organization itself created it. So I think there's a couple of flaws in the system. One is we move people too quickly up an organization. For
Wow.
example, I have a client company that has a person who was just anointed president of the entity,
Yikes.
who in his prior role was a brand manager. I mean,
Hey.
didn't even do all of the steps that were in between. Now he might be great at it. I'm not judging him as a contributor, but it's that model, right? Of move,
Wow.
move, move people who are ready. Secondly, there's not really infrastructure built around how you're doing what needs to
Right.
get
The
done. So
process,
if
the
we have a report that's
process.
due, yeah, if we have a report due or presentation to be done, I'm not asking how it's getting done. I want to ensure that it gets done. And so if it gets done, I don't sit down and do an autopsy with you on the steps that you went to get it done. I pat you on the back and say, great job. And so it just perpetuates itself, Kathy, because we don't
Wow.
have the systems and process in place to ensure that people who get elevated, especially once they get to the vice president level, are now focused on the future and have given up. And when I say give up, I mean have given up all of the detail work. Can they ask questions and be observant? Absolutely, because they are accountable for it getting done. But that's what their employees are for. And if they don't have good employees or people who can't get it done, they need to work on that to get good people or improve the skill set of those people to get better.
I so love it.
But
And,
that's not what's happening.
no. And you're also bringing up, I don't know enough about the history of work, but I was talking to a client of mine who landed an amazing job, and she has a boss who has said something to her that you just don't hear many bosses say, and she's very senior. She said, "What do you want for your career going forward? I want you to think about that because you're a real driver here, and what you want you can get, but what do you want?" And my client admitted, I don't know. I don't know. I can't figure it out. So thankfully, coaching. But how many bosses do you know sit down and say that?
So
Who are
this is
true
another,
mentors, true
yeah.
strategic advisors? Go ahead. I'm really interested in hearing what you have to say.
Yeah, well, I think this is another flaw in the system. And I know our goal today wasn't to talk only about flaws in the system, but
Why not?
uh, you know, not having career development discussions are missing in most organizations around the globe because we're all get it done, get it done, get it done type people. And we're focused on what comes out, not how you got there. And we're not spending enough time talking with people, not about projects, not about clients, not about initiatives and goals. How are you doing? Are you enjoying what you're doing? Is
Right.
this on the career path for you? Do you feel good about where you are? Some people don't. Some people think by the time they're 35, they should be a VP. And if they're 36 or 37 and are not yet, that's creating a personalized pressure on them. So, those are extremely important, ironically, extremely important conversations that you should be having with team members that don't happen in corporations today. So we're more focused on getting it done. We're more focused on activities versus career development when we should be talking more and more with people like your boss did or with for your client about where
Yeah.
they are and how they feel about where they are.
Love it. You know what it reminds me of? Is it Noel Tishy? Is that how we pronounce it? Who wrote a leadership expert, but he wrote about teaching your teachable point of view. And, I try to do this with my staff. I have a funny anecdote. I remember when I was managing whatever, a $30 million budget. And there were so many line items that I didn't care about. I just didn't care. And my boss, so I was a vice president, there were three, and we reported to a senior vice president. And he said, chastising all of us, look, you got to manage this money as if it's your money. And I remember going, okay, I'll try. But, I didn't know how to do it. I didn't have the feeling. Now that I'm managing, not a $30 million budget at all, but my own business. And I see that my staff, they're not my staff, they're contractors and my team, they'd take a bullet for me. I mean, I love these people, but are they managing my money the way are they managing their time and resources as if it's their money? No, I don't think we can do that. I think it's really hard to do that. But why I bring it up is if we can teach our teams how we think. So instead of what I'm finding is this is like sounding self-congratulatory, and I don't mean to, but when I'm brainstorming 50 new directions and I'm dumping a lot on my team, if I feel that if I don't give them my teachable point of view, it's going to just feel like a fire hose. Why is she doing
Mhm.
all this right now? Do we really need to do this all in December? And so if I can share, here's where I'm going, here's where I'm thinking the new direction for me is, and really teach them how I make a decision, I think they're more on board. What do you think about that, Ed?
Oh, absolutely, Kathy. I think you said it eloquently, and I don't think I could say it any better. Bosses should meet with their subordinates once or twice a year. It's not even a huge commitment of time. And it could be during another activity like breakfast or lunch. So you don't even have to add it to your agenda to talk about you, to talk about your interests, your your state of where you are, where you want to go, and how I can help you, especially if you're somebody who they think highly of.
Right.
You want to ensure that those types of conversations, and you want to be realistic about it. You might say, look, we'd love to make you a vice president at this company. Here's how it might happen. And it will probably take 2 to 3 years. So now I know that, right? It's not going to happen on January,
Right.
but it's going to take a couple of years. But at least now I know that, and I can stay focused and engaged as long as I'm still seeing those types of support structures in place. But again, unfortunately, these are not the types of conversations that are happening. We're not providing each other feedback on things we could be doing differently to be more effective. We're not talking about career. We're talking about projects, initiatives. We've got too many conference calls, too many meetings. We're running from meeting to meeting. Every day feels like a sprint to just survive, as opposed to spending time on the things that you and I are talking about that I think are more impactful and helpful.
Love it. There's a few other things I want to get your take on: soliciting experiential feedback and psychological bravery. One thing we haven't touched on, and I bet it falls into one of these categories. If you're going to be a great leader, you also have to say the hard stuff. It can't all be a walk in the park. I mean, people need to see, your people need to see where they're falling down a little bit, where maybe, I've had situations where I've had to say to a person working with me, you're asking a lot of questions, and it's okay that you're asking me questions, but these are questions you can answer. So what I'm needing from you is that you think it through first. And then when you have a question, I'd like you to propose the answer you think is best. And I've had situations where the person can't do it. They can't
Mhm.
do it. And I know there's a little bit of a gap of critical thinking. So I've had to figure out what I'm going to do with that. Is it serious enough that remedial work has to happen? Whatever. But what I also see is missing, and maybe this is part of what you call psychological bravery, it's not all a walk in the park to manage people. You have got to say the hard things that are out of love from your heart. But here's what I see needs to shift if you want to really grow. Is that part of what you think psychological bravery is?
Well, I think what you're talking about is what I call fairness. And
Mm,
first of all, leading is not easy. So no one ever said it's easy. There wouldn't be a million books out there on leadership if it was that easy, right? So
that's so
it
true.
is incredibly complex. It changes on a regular basis. So just
Right.
as soon as you figure it out, suddenly your team's going to change, or the priorities are going to change, or
So
the
true.
business model is going to change. Everything might change. So leadership is an ongoing educational process. But if you imagine a balance with a statue in the middle, to me, that statue is fairness. And on one side are the positives, right? How do I give complimentary feedback? How do I recognize people in good ways? How do I ensure they're engaged, right? These are all the positive things that I do as a leader to help that person grow. And the other side are the more constructive things. How do I give people feedback when things aren't going the way that I want? How do I potentially even terminate somebody from the company if in fact after multiple opportunities and training
Mm,
and learning and giving them everything that they should get, they just are not the right fit for the role? Neither are harder than the other because they should be balanced. And so a fair leader is somebody who can pat you on the back, but also slap you on the back of the hand if you're not doing what needs to be done in a very respectful, candid way. I know I would want to work with somebody who told me just as much of the things that I'm doing well as things I could be doing differently to be more effective because I'm more apt to grow. It's
right.
not like work is a race where there's a line. As long as I get past the line, I'm okay. the line keeps moving and I have to keep growing and evolving in order to make great progress. And so, I think
Love that.
psychological bravery, psychological safety comes from candor, respectful candor to people on things they're doing great and things that they're not doing great in a very balanced way.
Beautiful, beautiful. One thing occurs to me. I had a client once, and it's come up many times after this. And she said, I hate my boss. I hate my boss. And my boss is terrible to me. My boss is terrible. So I said, flesh that out. Let me understand. She micromanages all these things we're talking about. And I said, I want to ask you a question. Let's call her Sarah. Sarah. Yep. Tell me what you really think of your boss. Do you respect your boss? No. Do you feel you could do your boss's job? Yes, in half a second. And I should be doing her. And so I said, you know that she knows you feel that, right? And her eyes got big. So one thing I want to tell everyone, as a therapist, I felt this, but long before, everything is energy. And if you hate your boss and think they're dumb as dirt and that you should get that person's job, they know it. And the human instinct is to protect ourselves from a threat. So if you're putting out that energy, you're never going to get, unless the person's really oblivious, but they're going to feel it and you are going to be a threat to them. And
Mhm.
threats are not easily withstood. It's not going to be pretty. So I said, what I'd love to do, rather than what you think you hired me for, which is to, move you out of this boss, I want you to give me 3 months and I want to work with you to turn this around, that you stop hating your boss, that you start to see your boss work. It was truly magical. And I
Mm.
am not joking. By the end of 6 months, she was promoted and
Wow.
they had
Wow.
repaired the relationship. So would you, it's probably not your realm to talk about energy as much as maybe it would be mine, but you probably see that a lot in the dynamic of someone struggling with their boss, but really it's co-created. It's not just the boss is terrible. Well, sometimes we do have terrible narcissistic, what do
Mhm.
you think about that story, Ed? Have you seen that kind of dynamic?
Oh, I would tell you that probably 85% of my clients, and I've not been studying it, but just as an observer of it, 85% of my clients believe they could have a better relationship with their boss. And it's not all the time that they
Mm.
hate them, but they just believe that they could have a better relationship with their boss. And in fact, chapter one of my book, Drive Your Career, is called How to Have a Positive Relationship with Your Boss, because I do believe in
Mm.
energy. And a good colleague of mine is an energy manager, not a time manager, because time
Wow.
is fixed, but energy is variable. And we tend to put energy on things we like, and we don't put energy on things we don't like. And so you want to manage your energy level more effectively.
Mm.
And if I don't like my boss, I'm not going to put a lot of energy into that relationship. If I do like my boss, I'm going to put energy into that relationship because I want to keep it going. And so, how do I shift that energy? And so, I do believe that for people to have more impact on their career, and that's why the subtext of the book is, how to ensure your own success, not somebody else coming in and doing it for you, but you need to ensure you have a positive relationship with your boss. And some bosses, it is impossible to have a positive relationship with because it is a relationship. There are two people, not
Right.
just you. But
Right.
you want to look back 6 months or a year from now and say, you know what, I did everything that I could
Mm.
to have a positive relationship with Ed, and I could list it for you right now. He wasn't game, he wasn't interested, he never gave it back. And so I just either settled in and rode out the relationship or I moved on, right? But I didn't bluff, right? I didn't pretend that everything was great and said, "Oh, thank you, you're the best boss ever," and then at the water cooler said, "Oh my God, what a terrible boss, worst boss I ever had." But I tried to make it better. But I think, Kathy, that's an important point because I think for people to be drivers of their career and to ensure they're moving at the rate they want to move, they have to ensure they have a positive relationship with their boss.
That's the truth. The 85% that say, I wish I had a better relationship, do most of them think it's the boss's fault? They
Oh,
don't
of course,
they don't see their part in it. So
of
you're
course.
doing that same work. Can
Well,
I
and and let me just quickly mention to
yeah.
you, a question I love to ask, which almost
Mm.
always throws a person off, is they'll say, and I start asking during interviews, "Can you tell me a little bit about your relationship with your boss?" Because I now have a high expectation that it's going to be, well, it's not great,
Right.
and in those 85% of the time when it's not great, my next question is, so what are you doing to perpetuate that? And they're like, what are you talking
Good for
about? It's not
you.
me, it's my boss. And I said, well, that's something that we should think and explore about, because this is a relationship. And, I don't know that you're the victim here, because you might be in victim mode where it's always you that's getting impacted. There may be things that you're doing that could be fostering or, putting a little fuel on the fire that if you did it a little bit differently might make things better.
Sounds like you had some marriage and family therapy training over there, Ed. Because marriage and family therapists think about the system, that nothing is in and of itself. It's all related to the system. Sounds like you're on all over that. Can
There
I
you
ask you
go.
this question? I'm really asking you because I'm picking your brain here. I have this funny little thing. If someone, and it doesn't happen much anymore because people know what I'm all about, but it used to be that someone would say, I would like coaching because I'm a director and I want to be a vice president and I want to make 50,000 more. And I will say to them now, I don't work on that goal. And they're like, what? What kind of coach are you? And I say, what I would work on is how do you become a higher level contributor so that that will come naturally? But once you are that, you may not want to be a vice president at this company. You may find you're on a whole other path, but I don't want to talk about the title. I want to talk about how you are contributing. Do you hear people complaining about they're really fixated on, I need that title to be, and I need to add, almost always people fixated on that don't feel
Well,
recognized and valued.
so I do hear it, I wouldn't say frequently, but it does come up. And I will tell you, most people say, I really want my next step to be a VP. I should have been a VP by now. I'm not a VP by now. But then they'll also say, oh my God, that sounds so horrible. This really isn't about, just being a
They'll
VP.
say
So
that.
they do try to self-correct. So, because I think they realize that it's not just about title and role, not all the time, but with some degree of frequency that might happen. So, we live in a very hierarchical structure
Right.
in organizations, and a lot of organizations are trying to get flatter and not have titles and things of that nature. But some people do see career path as an active, engaged process. And as I mentioned earlier, if I'm not a VP by 40, something must be wrong, right? And
And
it must be
I need
me.
to clarify because some people are thinking, what is she talking about? Don't get me wrong. I want everybody I work with to earn as much as they can and be an
Sure.
incredible contributor and rise with greater leadership responsibility if that's what you want. What I mean is being fixated by the words in the title.
Hmm.
That's not, I don't think, what you want. And when you're doing that, you're missing, it's like that relationship again. What
Yeah.
are you
Yeah.
doing to be the higher level? Perfect.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
answered it.
I tend to be more behavioral based, and so it's what are the behaviors that you aren't doing or could be doing a little bit differently, and so people see it more often.
That's it. Finally, since this is Finding Brave and yours is Be Brave at Work, your podcast, any words, remaining words about how we can be braver in our work, in our leadership as a manager, as a leader, as a team leader? What else can we tell people?
Yeah, well, interestingly, today, but we had to reschedule it. I was planning on recording my 1 year anniversary of Be Brave at Work, where one of my guests was the host, and I was
Oh,
going to be the
cool.
guest. So we
Oh,
had to
neat.
reschedule it for next week. And in that session, I plan to share what people can do to be more brave at work. So I love the fact that our topics so overlap. And
Wow.
one area I would tell folks that, and this is based on the conversations that I've had with dozens and dozens of people over the last year. One area that people should think about to be braver at work is presence, which
Mm.
is if I'm going to have a conversation with somebody that's going to be tough, I need to be highly present in that meeting, meaning I'm listening well, I'm curious, I'm fully engaged in helping this person be more successful. I'm not just running in and hitting them over the head with a 2x4. I'm not thinking about the other 50 things that I have to work on. I'm not doing it in 10 minutes when, because I've got a meeting at 3 or whatever it might be. I'm fully present and prepared to have a great conversation with somebody. And I think that's
Love
something
that.
everyone should think about. How can I be highly present to help this person? Most people, even though they want to give people feedback, they tend to go to the negative more than the positive. It's, gee, I don't want to say that because that might hurt Ed's feelings. How can I help Ed? Because the way he's behaving is having a negative impact. So I want to help Ed, not hurt Ed. And if you can
Mm.
get to that context, your likelihood for success will be significantly greater.
I adore that comment. I think again a lot about therapy training and how that's helped me in every possible way. But part of that is that deep, you're looking into their eyes, you're feeling what they feel. You are not just waiting. I'm not, it's funny. These podcasts are like that for me. I have no idea what I'm going to say while you're talking. I hope you feel it, fully engaged.
Hmm.
And then, I will write down a word. Okay, I think I want to talk about energy, but I don't want to focus on what I'm writing and what I'm thinking. I want to be fully emotionally, physically, spiritually, behaviorally present for you. And I think that one of the challenges people have is they're not used to what that is.
Hmm.
They're not like if I were to give a tip for somebody about how to be present, it's take 3 deep, long breaths. I mean,
Hmm.
3 breaths actually change your nervous system. But as a singer, we have to breathe deeply down here,
Hmm.
diaphragmatically supported. Honestly, when I do that, I feel differently. I'm not so full of the chatter up here.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there's all sorts of strategies about, maybe you even have them in your book, but how can we be more fully present? That we're not just waiting to jump in and give our response, but we're truly there for that person and listening. Any more tips about how to be present?
So, in reality, I don't know that there are great tips in my current book, Drive Your Career, on being braver at work, even though, being brave is an important leadership characteristic. I'm a big believer in the number three. And so, my third book, Kathy, is going to be called Be Brave at Work. And it's going to be focused on taking ideas to action. And we're going to be talking specifically, really recapping the conversations that I've had with others, all with their approval, of course, to talk about what bravery at the workplace looks like, feels like, why we avoid it, and what we can do differently in order to be more effective. So I think there's a lot of lessons and learnings, there's that everyone experiences it. And I don't like using the word everyone because there's always, you can't
Few
always be that
outliers
exclusive,
there.
but a few outliers. But I'm pretty comfortable saying that I think everyone has experienced a moment where they could have been braver and
Yeah.
didn't, and
Oof.
regret it. Gee, I should have said something and I didn't. Maybe it was at a meeting, maybe it was to somebody, or did do something that required, amongst many emotions, feeling bravery, and did something that made a difference. And so I hope people can learn from that. I hope they learn, as I'm sure they do from your podcast and from my podcast. Everyone's experiencing this. Everyone defines it a little bit differently based on their life, and here's what they're doing in order to make great progress.
I love it. When's that book coming out?
Oh, it's like 2 or 3 years out, Kathy.
Oh,
So
if you said this year, I was going to fall over. I mean, you're so prolific. And where I just love it. I love every word. I love it when people come together, you and me, our guests, and we're from such a different trajectory, yet we somehow dovetail so many ways. And it's fun to talk to people who don't agree too. We don't all have to be the same people, but your background is so fascinating in the way you approach helping people be the best they can be. I love it. Where do people learn about you? Where do they get your book? Tell us everything.
well, you can email me at ed@excellius.com, and that's
Mhm.
EXCELLIUS.com.
All right.
You can go to my website, excellius.com, and when you go on it, a pop up will appear where you can order the book Drive Your Career, or you can go to any of your favorite online bookstores and order it online. And I hope you do, but more importantly, I hope you do because I think there's some valuable lessons that I've learned over the last 12 years working with clients that I think can positively influence your career development.
Well, we know that because we just got a big dose of it for a half hour. Good luck with your book. I hope it continues to rise those charts and be so get in the hands of a million people. Ed, thank you for being here. And
Thank you,
people,
Kathy, for having me.
oh, my pleasure. People, we want to hear from you. Ed even gave his email. That's pretty incredible, and we'll link to it below. We would love to hear from you. I'm micromanaging, and I think it might be because I'm afraid. Or let us help you. We're coaches. We love it. Let us hear from you wherever you see this. That would be great. And if, I know I don't ask this on the podcast much, but if you're listening to it, some people say it's their morning thing they do in the morning, listening to the podcast. Give us a rating, will you? And a 5-star or whatever you want to say on Apple. We'd love to hear what you think, and we hope it's moving you forward. Thanks again, Ed. Come back with your next book.
I will. Thank you, Kathy.
Thank you, everyone. Have a fantastic week, and we will see you next time. Bye.